and then we'll do Adon Olam at the end. So with that thought in mind, I'm going to go to share screen to my notes. And go here. Where am I? There we go. And here, there we go. Shrink this in front of me. All right. So we're still focusing on human beings, on the value and significance of the human being. So let's talk about the significance of the way man and Eve, Adam and Eve, larger. It's about as large as I can get. Let's see if I can get touch. There we go. Yes, I got it. Okay, so some more. So I said again, last week I touched on this, and I said, we really can't understand the idea of Adam and Eve without understanding the pagans. And so, especially women in Judaism, can only be understood in the context of the attitude of ancient societies, especially in the Middle East, towards women. And this, too, is rooted in the philosophy of the world. So forget what they talk about the original societies of human beings being matriarchal. Nobody has found them. And there may be one or two tribes somewhere where the women have control. Generally, what they may have is more egalitarian societies that exist. But again, not widespread. Let's go to the real world, the real Middle East. Ancient gods were human beings. You understood this, extended, just bigger. Male and female, bound up with sex, heterosexual, transsexual, transspecies, anything and everything that moved. That's the way the world was. And from this perspective, we see how males who write down the myths and write down their interpretation of the world look at the females. There are very few cases that we have where the women wrote things. We have Deborah's song, we have a verse of Miriam's song, we have Sappho of Lesbos among the Greeks, but the men were the ones who wrote, so we depend on that. So we go back to the Greeks and that story about creating Pandora to punish man. And so I just pulled out some, I mentioned it last time, but here's more about it. This is from the great Hesiod, that's his name, who is the collector and gatherer of Greek mythology and puts it in formalized very well. It's about the 7th, 8th century before zero. So he writes, the golden Aphrodite gave her grace to shine upon her head and cruel longings and cares that weary the limb. That's the gift from Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And as he charged Hermes, Mercury, the messenger god, the slayer of Argus, to put in her shameless mind and a deceitful nature. For ere this tribes of men lived on earth remote and free from ills and hard toil and heavy sickness. But the woman took off the great lid of the jar in her hand, scattered all these, and her thought caused sorrow and mischief to men. Right? Blame the women. Right? Sachez la femme. Blame the woman. Right? Then here, let's go to the other side of the world, to India. Maybe around the same period as we have the formation of Hindu civilization. It's around the same time, a little bit later. Mahabharata, which is a great, it's an epic drama. It's been televised. It was done as a televised presentation. I think it's 14 hours long, something like that. It's one of Hindu civilization's greatest epics. Maybe it's the greatest epic. And it's also around the time of the biblical prophets. Somewhere 6th century, 7th century before zero. And so how women were created by the grandsire Brahman. There's no creature more sinful, O son, than woman. Woman is a blazing fire. She is a sharp edge of the razor. She is poison. She is a snake. She is fire. All these united together. And so Brahman ascertained what was in the heart of the deities and created women. Those that sprang from his creation with the aid of an illusion became sinful. The grandsire bestowed upon them the desire of enjoyment, all kinds of carnal pleasure. Blame the woman for sex. That's what they're saying. Tempted by the desire of enjoyment, they began to pursue persons of the other sex. It's the women caused it. This is Hindu literature. I forget about the Kama Sutra and so on. It's not being egalitarian. The Lord of the deities created wrath as the companion of lust. The jealous wife. Persons of the male sex yielding the power of lust and wrath sought the companionship of women, they are saving lives. Now, in all fairness, let me get to our neighbors, our closest neighbors, right? The ones who, it's very possible, ancient Israel absorbed the Canaanites. Hebrew is the Canaanite language, right? And their terms appear in the Bible. Here's the Semitic deity Anat. Anat appears the name in the Bible. It's adapted as Shamgar ben Anat, a hero like Samson. All right, so one of the early judges. And she appears in Egypt, also in Jewish community of Egypt, in Elephantine, as the consort of God. So she's big. She's popular among the ancient Israelites, too. They weren't supposed to, but they knew the story. So you don't mess with her. It's in the account of Akhat. Anat gluts her liver with laughter. Her heart is filled with joy. For Anat's hand is victory. For knee-deep she plunges in the blood of soldiery, up to her neck in the gore of troops. She washes her hands in the blood of soldiery, her fingers in the gore of troops. So Mars is not a male in this. Mars is the female. She is Mars, right? What the Greeks is Mars. Here she is on the skulls of her victims. Okay. Now, let's be fair. Not all the ancient Middle East was like that. In the earliest written civilization, which is Sumer, which is before the Babylonians by centuries and centuries before, beautiful epic, Gilgamesh, and it is known in the ancient Middle East, has translated them into Akkadian, and some of the parts of Gilgamesh appear in archaeologists' findings in the land of Israel. There, the gods create woman because man is wild and destroying the universe. They create woman to civilize the man. That's an interesting take. But that's maybe the only one. But against the civilizing function of the female. Let's say a rarity. So let's put things first. If you ever look at the record of women in the Bible, it turns out that all the women are righteous. Well, look at them. The Jewish women. But the men, not so. So the villains in the biblical stories are always the men. The women are the good ones. The troublemakers are all from the pagan women. Jezebel and the daughter Athaliah, they're Phoenicians. But if you look at the descriptions of the women, they're the ones who are the heroes. Now, we do have cases. Amos is upset, for example, the wives of the wealthy, spoiled wives. Parota Bashan, cows of the Bashan, they're overfed, they oppress the poor and destroy the needy. Ezekiel complains about the women who mourn the pagan Tammuz. But when you look at the individual figures, see that it is the women who are the heroes or heroines. Now, we can't read our concept of equality, which is a 20th and 21st century concept, or 18th, 19th century concept, but we can extrapolate from the past principles to the future. The idea of Ezer Kenegdo, the female as the equivalent to the male. The idea of men and women jointly bound in the covenant at Sinai. The idea that civil and criminal laws apply to both, with the understanding male has the economic power, and with it comes the economic obligation. And the idea of filial piety to cover both parents, honor father and mother, fear mother and father. Two terms are interchanged. And then from Proverbs, as I mentioned, I showed you, the image of wisdom is female as the first creation. The mother is source of Torah and teaching, just as the father is. And you have the idea of the Eshet Chaya, woman as provider, strength of household. Now, I mentioned to you also, there is always Kohelet, there's always an other guy, and it's very wise in the Bible. We always put in the other guy who said nasty things about women, but he said nasty things about God. So, it's fair. So, we also talk about sex, right? For the pagans, that was right. What did the Hindu text say? She wants the lust. No. In rabbinic thought, contrary to Christian thought, sex is not the original sin. It precedes it. I have this statement. Rabbi Yochanan Bar Hanina says, daytime is 12 hours long. So the first day, he says, and what happened at each hour? And it goes on, a very interesting little midrash. And on the first hour, Adam was created on that day. Then in the seventh hour, Eve was paired with him. And in the eighth, they rose to the bed as two and descended as four. When they rise to bed as two, to go to bed is to have a relationship. Yeah? And she has a child, two kids, Cain and Abel, right? In the ninth, he was commanded not to eat of the tree of knowledge. In the 10th, he sinned. Wait a minute. So, what did I say? The sin is afterwards, not before. Very important. Very important point. Now, another thing. the underlying unity of all humanity. Now, Jews are set aside as Am Levadad Yishko. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Good question. So what happens is in early Christian thought, it is very much identified with the sexual relations. Therefore, Jesus must be neutral, and Mary herself must be neutral. Immaculate Conception. That's particularly in Catholic. The Protestants break away from it. But it is very strong in original Catholic thought. Again, there have been shifts. I mean, you always have to recognize shifts, but those were in the foundations early. So let's go back to the idea of humanity. Go back to those nasty Greeks. I mean, I can't say nasty Greeks, but they're part of our civilization. But, they're important values in Western civilization. But they're things that we have to know. In the Greek account of the flood, after the flood, we have the equivalent to Noah in the Greek account. So there are no people on earth. They don't have children. They pick up the stones and they throw them over their backs as they walk. And human beings then, each one comes out of a different rock. So there's no commonality except that they share coming out of some rocks. There's no inherent relationship from one stone to the next then. Then there's the Thessalian Greek origin myth. The Thessalians, one of the major tribes of ancient Greece, they are born out of ants to become fierce warriors. So here's a major Greek tribe out of the confederation of Greek tribes, and they also go into the number of 12, and they are descended from ants. Ants are fierce warriors. They're better than you, right? So there's no commonality then. So now what about the rabbinic dictates on the commonality and uniqueness of each human being? One, and I didn't write it down here, but there's a very interesting midrash. God shapes man out of the soil. Where does he take the soil? So the midrash goes and says, north, south, east, west. From the four corners of the world, he took the soil so that no one would say, I am inherently better than the next because of my origins. So then we go on this famous case. What happens in a court case? The jury, it's the witnesses. The witnesses are dragged in to talk about a murder case. And so what do we tell the jury in the murder case in advance? Therefore, but a single person was created in the world to teach that if any man has caused a single life to perish from Israel, notice I underlined it and highlighted it, he is deemed by Scripture as if he had caused the whole world to perish. And who saves a single soul from Israel, he is deemed by Scripture as if he had saved the whole world. So now, notice that here it says Israel. Our older texts, which may be older, uses the word without the word from Israel. You might ask, well, why is the judge admonishing the witness with the word Israel? It's very simply because, as this is being written, Jews have no right to try non-Jews. Only Jews. It's under Roman law. The truth is that in capital cases, the Roman law took it away from Jews also. But all law cases were decided by the authority. So if you were not Jewish, you were tried under the Roman courts. So the case would only come in the case of somebody Jewish. And as I said, the actual courts, by the time that this is written down, couldn't carry it out anymore. All right? That's it. Okay. So that's, hence, talking to a Jewish jury, you say from Israel. But when you're talking to, in general, generic, it will be universal. So now it continues, says, again, but a single person was created for the sake of peace among humanity, that one should not say to another, my father was greater than your father. All right, so no inherent power, superiority of any line of the human entities. Again, but a single person was created against the heretics, so they should not say there are many ruling powers in heaven. This one's created by Mars, this one's created by Venus. No. One source for all humanity. And again, but a single person was created to proclaim the greatness of the Holy One, blessed be. Humans stamp many coins with the same seal, and they're all alike. But the King of Kings, Holy One, has stamped every human being with the seal of the first man, yet not one of them are like one another. Right? the beauty, the ability of the human being to be so diverse and different, one from the other, and yet all share the same seal. Beautiful, beautiful statement. And the conclusion, everyone must say, for my sake was the world created. For my sake was the world created. Beautiful point. So that, why would we tell this to the witness? I mean, he's got to make a decision. His word is, somebody's life or death is hanging on the line. Why should I get involved? I don't want to get involved. This is a life and death case. The world is created for you. The world is created for. Let's judge carefully what we're doing. But, right? Taking from this, the uniqueness of every individual human being. But it's very interesting that the Quran knows this very well. Muhammad knows this very well. And it recites the story of Cain and Abel, and how Cain learns to bury Abel by watching the bird bury its dead. And there's a copy, basically it's a copy from a rabbinic midrash. And then it continues. It says, that is why we ordained for the children of Israel. He knows this midrash, or he knows the Mishnah. He may not know it exactly, but he knows it very well. We ordained for the children of Israel that whoever takes a life, unless it's punishment for murder or mischief in the lad, will be as if they killed all of humanity. And whoever saves a life, it will be as if they saved all of humanity. So what's interesting is it would seem that he had the version, the universal version. And that was the version that was known. Otherwise, it would not be applicable to all humanity. He's teaching his fellow Muslims that this which came to the Jews as a command from God is upon us also. Right? Another thought. All humanity share a common moral obligation, moral and spiritual obligation, what we call the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 laws of the descendants of Noach. And where do we have it? It's in the Baraita. So Baraita meaning a rabbinic source, not included in the Mishnah, but of equal value, almost equal value. Tanu Rabbanan Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. 7 commands were given to the descendants of Noah, or humanity. Establishing courts of judgment, prohibition against the cursing of the name of God, that's Birkat Hashem, the prohibition of idol worship, prohibition against forbidden sexual relations, prohibition of bloodshed, prohibition of robbery, prohibition against limb from a living animal, what we call Ever Ben Achai. Right? Those are the 7 basic foundations for all human society as they saw it. Right? And then, as explained by the Meiri's medieval rabbinic commentator on the Sanhedrin, any Noahide, anyone of all humanity that has accepted upon himself the 7 Noahide laws is one of the righteous people of the world, including the category of religious people, and has a place in the world to come, a person of religion. And it's codified in Maimonides, Ken Chasidei Olam, Umot Olam, Yesh Lehem Chelek L'Olam Haba. The righteous of the non-Jews also have a portion in the world to come. We assume that all Jews have a portion in the world to come because the collective brings them into the world to come. The righteous do it individually from among the nations. They have a place in the world to come. What about idol worshippers? What about idol worship? Are we supposed to stop them? Are we supposed to preach against them? Look what happens here. Inside the land of Israel, where we control what's in our little territory by this time, which is not very much, okay, then no idol worshippers. Outside the territory, what about them? And the discussion is, can we accept them for shechita and for other things? What are things that we allow them to have? And it says, En rov ovdei kochavim minin. The majority of idol worshippers are not really considered heretics. Savar leki hadamar, following the position of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, I'll just write it here. It's in the Talmud. The majority of the nations of the world are not heretics. They're not considered pagans. With regard to slaughter, shechita, who might be a shochet, you could actually go with this. And the Gemara notes Rabbi bar Avua holds in accordance with Rabbi Chia. The status of Gentiles outside of Eretz Yisrael is not that of idol worshippers, as their worship is not motivated by faith and devotion, rather, minhag avotehem b'yedehem. It's the traditional custom of their ancestors that was transmitted to them. Yeah. No, then it's an action. That's not belief. Action is different from belief. Right? Right? That action is universal. So that's the idea of the 7 laws of Noah. right? So there are certain positions that are universal, but other things, believe I'm not going to go. I'm going to assume that they're just acting out of habit. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. They really don't mean it. But you know who else did this? When the Mughal Muslim rulers took over India, they're faced with a dilemma. Because in Islam, you allow Jews to live under Islam, you allow Christians to live under Islam, pagans have to be converted by force or killed. Well, you got a big continent, a subcontinent there. They decided that Hindus are not pagans. They decided that the Hindus were what Muhammad included as Sabians, like the people of Shabbat, right? Queen of Sheba, Sabian. We don't know what he meant by that. And so they said, okay, we apply it to the Hindus. Hindus are not pagan. Boop. All right, because that's the real world. So we're not going to go around chopping people's heads off. That's it. We're going to accept people. Nature of the human being. As no, not your job. Not your job. Not your business. The opposite, the rabbi said, you know what, the idol is there, it's an honor of me, it's for me to enjoy. I'm not there to worship it. That's not us. No, it's not us. We're the ones who are obliged. Other people are not obliged. They're the idols, right? We're not, we don't, so in the land of Israel, right, the Torah reading says, inside the land of Israel, then we smash, clean out, get rid of it all. Outside the land of Israel, we don't touch. This is, no, we were supposed to. We weren't supposed to. Only inside the land of Israel. Oh, very clear, only inside. We have no business in the other parts of the world to go around. So it's, the Taliban go and smash the Buddhist statues. We didn't do it. Well, you know, I'll take a good example would be like the Christmas tree, right? Which is not really an idol, but it's something similar because it's very attractive. And Jews use Christmas trees, right? So we're very concerned because, right, then you begin to assimilate society. But I can't go and knock down the Christians' Christmas tree. I have no business doing that. I have no business doing that. Indeed, with Christianity, we came to a compromise a long time ago about Christian imagery and so on. And, we said there's no, the question for the Muslim and the Christian, and for Islam is less of a problem, but for the Christian, is what we call shituf, association. And association was, they had the idea of one God. They associated God with Jesus, but again, they're not Jews, so that's their realm. And we consider them as monotheists. It's just that they have this, they attach Jesus to it, so we don't understand why they're doing it, and we're not going to do it, but I'm not going to tell them what to do. Basically, that's what it boils down to.
We have it somewhere, I can't remember exactly, that when you live among the people that you are to respect the traditions and laws of the people with who
right,
you live.
That's a very important point, right? Shalu shalom medina. Pray for the welfare of the country where you're living. Right. For in his peace is your peace. That's number one. That's in, I think, Jeremiah. The other is Dina de Mechuta Dina. The law of the land is the law of the land. As long as the law is just and not, as it continues, where the king is operating like a thief.
Yeah. So, I couldn't remember where it was. I knew it was. Yeah. So it is Jeremiah.
I think it's Jeremiah. Yeah.
That says that.
I think
okay,
thank
you.
So now let's go back to human beings. What's the nature of the human beings, right? So, an old teacher of mine, and he was a member of my congregation. He was a beautiful teacher, Jewish teacher, and he told me his father's explanation of Jacob's ladder. He says that's the description of the human being. Sulam mutzav al tzav rosho magia shemaima. The ladder is stuck in the mud. The head reaches to the heavens. That's the human being, right? We're very physical beings stuck in the mud, but we are capable of reaching the heavens. That's the nature of the human being. So another term that describes what's the nature of the human being is torn between two lovers. You know that song, Torn Between Two Lovers? Well, the Jewish version is oili mi yitzri, oili mi yotzri. Woe to me from my inclination to do bad, to run after my passions. Oili mi yotzri, woe to me from the one who shapes me. That's the word yetzer, yetzer. In the story of creation, we have the word vayetzer Hashem et Adam on the second, right? And it says kitov. God creates man. And then the wording for creating, yetzer, forming, is created with 2 letters yud for some reason. Everywhere else it's 1 yud, it's 2 letters yud. So the rabbis interpret it and say 1 yud stands for the human being's capacity to do good. The other is the human weakness to run after his passions. It says they're both created, and God says they're good. And there's the understanding that both are temptation to do good, to be just, to be righteous, to give away everything, to never be moved by our passions. Very good. But the other hand, the drive for sex, the drive for food, the drive for alcohol, whatever it is driving us, also good. Also good. Nothing inherently evil in it. And so we have really the forerunner to Freud's tripartite human mind. The id, ego, superego, you remember this? The id is the self that is always desiring a bottomless pit, can never be satisfied. And the other side is the superego, the father image that can never be satisfied, is always demanding more. And in the middle is ego, which means I, me, myself, in the middle. And basically it's a reworking of the Jewish metaphor of an angel sitting on the right side, an angel sitting on the left side. This one, the passion to do, the libido, the drives, the passions. This one, the temptation to do, the drive to do good. And my head is in the middle, right? That's Freud just, and I don't know if he was conscious about it, but it certainly is the structure that he looked for. So what about the head in the middle, the ego? The head in the middle can pick. And that's another essence of the human being, freedom of choice. So when Cain loses out in the sacrifice to his brother Abel, he's upset. God tells him, sin is sitting in front of you. Right? It says, if you do well, shall you not be accepted? Do right, say. If not, sin is out to get you. Vitim shalbo. Yet you can control, your desire is to him, but you can rule over him, or it. If any of you read East of Eden, keyword there, Timshal, you can control the 2 stories of the 2 brothers in the East of Eden story. And then the idea of Uvacharta v'chayim, which is in Deuteronomy, the end of the book of Deuteronomy. You can choose life, or you will choose life, right? Or another phrase in Pirkei Avot, the rabbinic source, Hakol Tzafui, yes, everything is known in advance, but we still have the control over our final decision. All is judged in good faith, given the benefit of a doubt, and it's the preponderance of your works that counts. Right, this idea. Even though everything may be seen in advance by God, you finally have the final choice. And there actually is a suggestion that actually the reading is called Safun. Everything is unknown, and you have the freedom of choice. Safun, so it's that way. Now, I'm going to go end up with one other thing and wrap up, and that's the idea of the human being as partnering with God. Every time we, a famous rabbinic story about what is bread. Wheat is nice. God creates the wheat. You can't eat it by itself. It becomes bread when you put your equity, sweat equity, into it. So you become partner with God in creation. Shutafo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Human being seen as partner in creation in the way that the human being cultivates and develops the world around him or her. And we move then into the Kabbalistic concept, which is the human being now as not as this willy-nilly creature miserable to serving gods, but as the human being as manifested in the Jew, responsible to bring redemption to the process of tikkun, repairing the entire universe by raising the tzutzot HaKodesh, right? The parts of the destruction of the universe that have been mired in the universe. And the Jew's obligation in acting a life of holiness is to bring up those sparks buried in the universe to redeem the entire universe. Not just being nice to people. It's the whole act of spirituality brings redemption to the universe. So now we have this idea of the human being now, the human being created for this high purpose of bringing redemption to the entire universe together with God. God alone in need of the human being. Very, very different concept than, different from classic rabbinic, different from Jewish philosophy, but again, this idea, the potential of the human being. So there are my thoughts on the human being. We continue later on with the idea of how do we carry out our responsibilities to each other. I mean, yes.
When was the concept of the world to come? Was it with the Ezekiel?
The world to come is developing in the time of the Second Temple. How and where exactly, it's hard to trace, but we do see it already. You know, in the Maccabees, the idea of life after death, certainly that, the idea of physical resurrection, its combination, the idea of a messianic return, and life after death in the end of days. And so it's all being cultivated and developed over the course of centuries from that period on. Yeah. It's not clear, it's not in the First Temple period. All right, a little bit of fun. We have a few minutes. I wanted to do, in honor of Naomi Shemer, Naomi Shemer. I'll put this one on because I've got it here, and I've got the links here for myself.